Welcome to our session. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Smith. I'm the Director of Portfolio Operations for the UK for Atlas Residential. We have 3 properties that are either being developed, in lease-up, or are fully operational right now in different regions. But this isn't really about me. I'm actually really excited to be the moderator of this go and ask some of my really amazing peers. Lots of questions, all the tough ones, and with the group that we have up here, I have no doubt that it will be very transparent, very honest. And in fact, that's one of the things that I noticed about this year's Build to Rent Forum compared to even kind of 3 years ago, 4 years ago, is that for a long time there was a bit of fear about talking about failures, things like that. And what I really appreciated is that now we're actually seeing people going up there saying, hey, you know what? This is the reality of what we do. Things will kind of get mixed up a little bit, and let's move on, let's fix it. So I have no doubt that we'll probably hear some of those stories from the team here. This panel is about mobilization. So we very often hear about the investment side of it, about the cash flows, and then we hear about it once it's up and running. But there's this period between that is kind of a mystery for a lot of people still, and there are a lot of questions about what happens, what's the reality of that, what are all the little pieces that fit into the puzzle to make things actually happen when you open those doors and start handing keys over to residents. So I have today with me, we'll start out with Martin. I'll let them kind of introduce and talk a little bit about what their company does before we dive into the questions. Next to him I have Stephanie from Long Harbor, Lend-Lease. I'm looking down the row here, and
you're just looking at me.
well, naturally. So yes, sorry, head of Build to Rent with Lend-Lease. I have Helen Peace, who is with Live, and everybody obviously knows about Live and just their progress in the management piece. Obviously, we have Jenny from TP. And she's leading the charge over at Wembley. And then we have Sogol, who we were debating up here whether she looked like Selma Hayek or Marissa Tomei. We'll be doing a poll at the end. But she is leading the charge over at Way of Life. So please do ask questions. We don't have Slido. Sorry, no gadgets for us today. But raise your hands, ask questions, and we'll open that up towards the end. So. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the company is doing?
Yeah, of course. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Betts. I'm the sales director for UK and Ireland for Yardi. Hopefully, many of you know about Yardi. We have a lot of clients here today, which we're very fortunate to have. So Yardi is a software provider for not just the build-to-rent industry, but any real estate asset class through, not just UK, but globally. So property management, CRM, investment management, facility management. So Yardi is a true ERP platform for any type of real estate, but the build-to-rent software has its own unique capabilities, which I'm sure we discuss during our session.
And I'm Stephanie Barbabosa with Lend-Lease. I've been in London for about 18 months. Before that, I was obviously in the US, working a little over 25 years. I'm still 29, though. Do the math later. All across the US for Alliance Residential, Gables Residential, and now I'm here, heading up the Build-to-Rent division for Lend-Lease. We currently have a $1.5 billion partnership with CPPIB, which most of you may have read in the trades a while ago. And we have 2 assets under construction, just under 700 units that'll be open in about 18 months.
Hi, I'm Helen Peace, and I'm the Managing Director of Live. Live have a number of different companies. We've got the operations side, which is really my love and what I do. We have Live Consult, Live Interiors, and Live Capital, and all of that comes together to give a holistic management strategy to Build to Rent for us as a business. We have currently 10 buildings that are operational, Build to Rent buildings operational. We have another 5 that we're currently mobilising at the moment. And when we put the 2 together, that's over 2,000 units nationwide. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jenny Foytik and I'm from TP. I've been with TP for almost 4 years actually, so right from the offset, which has been exciting, lots of changes. We're most well known ultimately for our Wembley site because that is the site that we have at the moment. We're operating just over 550 units presently, but we've got consent for up to 7,000, delivering 750 this year and 1,500 next year. So we're very busy at the moment. We've mobilised 3 buildings ultimately to date, and we've got 3 that we're going to mobilise this year. That's what we're gearing up for at the moment. And to clarify, we build, we rent, we operate.
Hi, my name is Sogol. I don't know what you're going to call me at the end of this session, but I'm a managing director of Way of Life. You've probably seen a stand outside. We are an in-house management platform exclusive for Long Harbour, which is the private equity firm. So we work with private pension institutes. We are quite young in terms of how long we've been in operation, but we've done a lot in the past 12 months. We've got 2 schemes in London, about 220. We have a scheme up and running in Manchester with a leisure facility and a swimming pool on the top, which we won the amenity space for that unit. We're opening 206 units in Birmingham in about a month's time, and we are opening another scheme in Leicester, which is 296 in summertime. So I don't know why I'm doing here, but we are adding additional 500 units to our portfolio. So we're very excited, and we manage everything in-house, and we invested a lot in terms of our IT website and automating a few things for our staff so they can spend their time where they should spend their time.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is for Jenny, because obviously Wembley is a huge project, and it's obviously multi-phased, and you've got so much capacity there to do so many different things. Obviously, you kind of had your first properties that came online. During your mobilization and going into the operational pieces, but even from talking to planners, developers, what are some of the different pieces that you've started to adapt within there? And then even into the marketing aspects of it, because obviously when you've got so many different properties of different styles, how do you differentiate those?
I mean, one of our major learnings ultimately is prepare as early as you possibly can. I think I do marketing's head in, I think, because every time we open a new building, I'm like, can we have it a bit sooner? Can we have the information a bit sooner? Preparing your leasing team and creating your in-house experts is essential to getting that building off the ground and making sure that your teams have got the assets, the information that they need to get moving. We're so lucky though in Wembley. We work so closely with the design teams. We work so closely with our PMs and DMs, which are the project managers and etc., to be able to actually get all of that information as early as possible and set up for pre-leasing is the other major thing that we've been focusing on. And we're able to do that because we have absolute confidence that our buildings will be delivered on time, which we'll all know here that a week in the lettings or the leasing world makes a huge difference to your customer. So delivering on time is absolutely essential. So very much focused on the detail, getting it together as early as possible, and focusing on pre-leasing.
Great.
To answer your question. So.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a similar question for you, because obviously you're developing new sites, you're in different markets, so a little bit different. Obviously, every community kind of has a little bit of its own heartbeat. So how are you taking what you've learned from the first ones and adapting those to the different markets, and how are you building that value through the design and procurement?
So I think, as you mentioned, it's very important to learn lessons. Every market is different, so you cannot say, I can just take this one and take it somewhere else and it will work, because you have a different customers, they have a different needs. But there are a few things that you need to consider when you're building a new scheme, and that is more about what type of kits do I put in, what did I learn from it, and how can I just avoid adding to my life cycle cost as well, which I think is very easy to miss right at the beginning. You're just thinking, oh, I want to have something cheap and cheerful. You're not selling, you're actually holding on to asset, and it will make a huge difference. So we have a scheme in London, but we have a scheme in Birmingham and Manchester. So I've mentioned that we have a swimming pool in Manchester, but I wouldn't say that that will work for any other schemes. But working closely with your development team right at the beginning when there is a design stage, so you can just say, actually, this is what you need to do, avoid doing this, we learned this, and even sourcing few bits and bobs, which feels like it's very easy, but like when you're going through the defect process, it's going to be very painful because your customer doesn't have a patience for you to find a handle from Switzerland and deliver it here. But we're always thinking, oh, we want to introduce something new, but we never think about the long term.
And Stephanie, I mean, obviously you have broad experience from the States, and you've brought that over here, which I can vouch for. That's not always the easiest transition. What were some of the biggest surprises to you when you first came over here? And then where are you seeing areas, A, that we've progressed, and B, that we still desperately need to progress?
So on the progression side, it's clear that everybody has a deep understanding at this stage of getting the basics right, of the importance of customer, of how all of the programs and the amenities and the sort of social impact that you make building community at a site lends itself to your returns. I think everybody gets that now. I think there's a massive push for technology here, and I think you guys understand the ways in which that can impact a building. Some of the other more kind of controversial things that need a little more progression and hopefully as a sector becomes more cohesive is largely around planning. We heard a lot about that already in the conference. In the States, planning is much more settled. It's much easier to rock up to any borough, any county, any state, and have a deep understanding of what it is you need to deliver. And so to the extent that we can sort of band together and help drive where planning needs to get to, that just benefits us all. I think that's a key one. I think sharing data is quite different here. So in the States, and Stephanie and I have talked about this before, we never did work in the same market, but we worked at the same company in the past, albeit at different times. And both of us, irrespective of whatever market we were in, we met regularly with our competitors, with on-site people. We hosted events, breakfasts, lunches, drinks. We shared information about the trends that we were seeing local to our market. And there's a real reticence, because it's such a nascent sector here, to kind of hold some of that IP back. And I think to a degree, there's certain things that you may feel strongly you need to hold back, but overall, we all boats rise together, and we all improve the sector together. And one of the knock-on effects of us getting together back in the olden days with our competitors is there's genuinely a drive to push each other to do better and to be better as operators, to provide the best customer service you can. When you find out that a competitor is offering something that you're not, there's this sense of one-upmanship, right? And so you do something even better than that, and then you go back to them and say, well, I'm doing this, and here's what the results I've gotten, and then they come up with something even better. And there's just this constant interplay of excellence, really, and at the end of the day, the customer is at the heart of it. So I would encourage everybody to be as candid and as transparent as lessons learned, and what are you doing and what are you trying to get to. That's really the best way the whole sector can improve as a whole. And the other thing is around sort of regulation. The stuff around the rent control is really frightening, I think, for a lot of investors and a lot of operators. And having lived and or worked in the majority of the markets in the States where rent control is in effect, San Francisco, Los Angeles, DC, and New York, it truly does not work. There are loads of bad outcomes from that sort of thing. And again, it's about getting together as a sector and talking about what we need in that sector and pushing things like that forward. So.
Thank you. And Martin, so Stephanie and the team of the group up here have mentioned about data, sharing knowledge, things to that effect. What are you seeing? So obviously we see a lot about technology. We see a lot about, obviously, portals, apps, all of that, which is great because obviously we want to reach our customers. But also, what are you seeing on the investor side that they're looking for that maybe a managing agent or an owner manager is looking for from technology?
I think there's there's two things really. I mean, data is key. I mean, I've heard it in all the sessions this morning how important it is. The investor wants to see the results of their investment, and without the data, they're just not going to see those results. So it's really important when the panel was talking about pre-leasing, is that when you're onboarding a new property, is that you've got as much data in there as possible. And it's not just about the data about the property, it's the data about your prospective residents. It's the imagery, that's all data. You know, the floor plans, videos, whatever the case may be. So the investor wants to see that as an operator, you are portraying their building in the correct light and enticing the customer. But the reporting back to the investor is ultimately key, because what they're looking for is, what's my bottom line? And it isn't just about rental and all the amenities from the rental, it's also about the cost. So having that data about your fixed assets within a centre is all important. So our Otis lift's not particularly performing very well. Is his air conditioning unit continually failing? This is all data and reporting back to the investor that they require. So it's up to the operator to ensure that that data is there, but also the investor provides them with that as well.
Now, Helen, as a third-party manager, and obviously you guys have really been leading the charge in a lot of the consultancy when it comes to new developments and investors coming into the arena. How are you finding that information, you're transmitting that over to those parties? And also, how is that impacting, how are you using that to actually provide some of that consultancy and then therefore operate the properties too?
Fine. I mean, I think, you know, we're very lucky because we've got Live Consult, and we have in Live Consult a team of analysts who research the market thoroughly. We're looking at demographics, we're looking at what the target market is, and we're actually able to utilise that information. So when we're talking about mobilisation, we've done a massive piece of work before we start to mobilise a building, and we know who we're talking to. Quite often you have to create your own market. And we mobilised a building in North Acton about 18 months ago, and if you type into Rightmove, I want to live in North Acton at the market rent that we were actually marketing at that time, you wouldn't do it. It wasn't there. So creating that data and working out how you're going to actually develop that market, create that market, and work very closely with the marketing as well to develop that is something that is key to us. So as I say, having Live Consult is great because we can use that. Data is absolutely key, and I can only say that I'm in complete agreement that we should share it as an industry. When you look in the US, and I was there recently doing a research visit, you look at how much data is shared between different competitor companies, as you guys know, and we can all build and develop from having access to that information. And I think there is a real reluctance at the moment in the UK, particularly from institutions, to share that, but I think it would benefit us all if we had access to it.
I agree completely. Everybody's heard me harp on about that before. So one of the questions that I have, Jenny, I'll start with you on this one, but especially because now you've got a few properties under your belt, how predictable is some of that take-up, especially now that you do have systems in place, you've got some of that data. Are you seeing that the trends are staying true, or is it really starting to change quite a bit?
We're still learning, ultimately. There tends to be your seasonal highs and lows that are fairly consistent. There's a good time that we want to bring a building to market, and then a not so good time. Ultimately, what we tend to find is that because we're concentrated in one place, we're able to start building that database for the next building quite quickly, and obviously we're experimenting a lot with how we market and when we market and how hard we market and where we market. Everyone knows that we've been on the tubes pretty consistently for the last 12 months, so that's brought us quite a lot of inquiry, and that can affect things. We actually had a pretty good December, and I think I've heard other operators say the same thing this year, which is really interesting because that is generally always been a challenging market. So the market itself is obviously changing. So predicting things exactly, it's a difficult one to answer, but we keep experimenting, and we all know that The market is also price sensitive, so we're always tinkering with, that's a Michael Allen term, he sat there at the back, I can see him. We're always tinkering with where that right rent is as well, that sort of line between a market rent and a good leasing velocity. So it's interesting times. We'll probably learn the most this year, bringing 3 buildings to the market at almost the same time.
And so obviously some of that is the customers starting to understand a little bit more about what build to rent is. But Helen, do you feel that the customers truly understand it? How are we getting that message out to them about why we're a little bit different from the traditional PRS market?
I don't think that they do yet, and I know it's been covered in the morning session, but I also think that until we decide what we're calling build to rent, it's very difficult to then move on from there. And I know in the sessions this morning we've had PRS, build to rent and multifamily all thrown in, and I think that we've got to decide what we are as well. But I do think that when there's not a huge amount of build to rent product, particularly outside of London, it is hard to take that message out to people, and I do think that people have to almost come into that message. We find that when inquirers come into the building, they're wowed by it. The fact that they actually have the amenity space. We talk through the resident engagement programs, and they buy in, and you can see them actually sort of their defences coming down when they're in the building, and they're starting to think, actually, you know, this is something different and I do trust this more. And so I think that, you know, at the moment that is really a job we've got to do from the ground upwards. I do think there will come a time, and not too far away, when we actually we will be able to message out, because we'll have the scale as an industry.
And Martin, how key is technology in getting that message out to the consumers? Because obviously through portals, things like that, you still have to kind of get them in. But one of the hindrances that we've heard, obviously, on some of the sessions this morning, and then just from talking to peers here and there, is also some of the lack of responsiveness of the machines, if you will, of the old providers for tech adapting to the new market.
Yeah, I think so. You've got where you've engaged before. You've got again that data to re-engage with your potential customers, because just because they weren't a resident 6 months ago, they are that potential resident today, and you've got to give them that experience. So, you know, if they've logged on to your portal before, you know, everyone understands now that they have log on and passwords. I've got about 5,000 passwords on different sites, whether holiday sites, whatever, and people expect that now. So when they go back to your business, they know that, you know, they are still a customer, even though you didn't rent the apartment out. All their data's still there, and they're part of you. So that engagement is a lot easier for that prospective resident. So, and that comes back to your central source of the truth with your system. Whereas if you don't utilise that, every time someone interacts with you, it's a new experience for them, which you actually don't want that to happen. But then reaching out to them as well, because, you know, survey people. You know, tell them about what's going on. As long as they're opting in, obviously with the GDPR rules, as long as they're opting in, you know, start surveying, start sending emails to them, brochures to them, just to kind of engage. Saying, look, what a great product we have here. I've got a swimming pool on my roof. Wouldn't you love to kind of live here? Although swimming pool on the roof in Manchester, that's got to be cold.
It's lovely. You should try it, Martin.
We'll do a site tour later on this afternoon. We'll get the bus parked outside. So you know, obviously we were talking a little bit about hiring, marketing, starting all of that early. Obviously you're doing that in different markets, but there has to be, I'm assuming, some consistency to kind of where you're slotting those in. How early are you starting your marketing so that you can get the correct messages across? And then how soon do you start looking to hire teams before you start actually pre-leasing?
I think what we need to realize that this is a rental product, so it's not a sales product. So you can do the advertising, you know, 12 months before, but in reality, people will give 2 months notice to their, you know, previous landlords to come in. And I think it's interesting because we're now having a construction site that, you know, we are advertising and we're telling people, oh, we're opening the doors at this time. and people say, yes, I love to take a property, but can I come and see it? And then you have all of these processes around that. This is a construction site. Is it safe? How are you going to take people? And, putting a marketing suite together is not going to be a cheap thing to do anyway. So I think you should have some kind of a balance of where you should, advertise it. But in terms of the pre-lets and engaging with the corporates, you can do that, much earlier, because there might be, a corporate company, let's say it's IBM, KPMG, and HBC, that they are trying to take people to a different location, and that can be a selling point for them to say, we can find you a place to go and live. So I know that the markets have a different view, and I like to hear Jenny's answer. It's lovely to have everything on the ground, but I'm just thinking, how are we going to deal with this volume? Because if we cannot go back to people, we might just also create a bit of a unhappy customer because we cannot get to them. We don't have the resources. In terms of the staff, I was amazed that this morning everybody talked about the design and planning, and nobody even touched on the staff. And they are the people who are going to make your business, and they are the people who are going to meet people, and they can sell your products, not the people who are sitting in a boardroom because they have no idea. And I always say that if you think that you're opening the door and everything's going to be perfect, they've never been operational people. They've been sitting in a boardroom. I'm losing my voice, but it's not just it's the excitement of opening a door. I think that's what I will say. But in terms of the staff, I will say you need to, I know it's a cost, but I think you should recruit the staff about, between 4 to 3 months before you open the door. So they know the product, they know what they're selling, and basically they fall in love with what they're going to sell to other people, because they know how the lift is working, they know about the units, they get involved in terms of ordering some furniture, designing the layout and the amenity, because they're going to be breathing that space day in and day out. So I think it's very important. And some people saying, oh, what about the concierge? I think that, don't underestimate, their power that they've got. As soon as somebody's walking through the door, who will they see? Not me, the concierge. So they need to feel about how everything is operating and having a handover with the, other contractors as well. So that's what I feel is, essential to do. And I hate to think about that. We still have colleagues that they opening their door and their first day that their staff is turning up is with the customer, not before. So if you don't know about the building, how are you going to sell it?
Correct. Agreed. I think maybe that's probably the one hindrance is that we all actually are speaking from the same, a similar hymn sheet at least, and I think in different phases. But again, it goes back to the fact that we're starting to see this bigger understanding, which Stephanie mentioned earlier. And Stephanie, coming from a market where, speaking about staffing, you have such a huge talent pool of people who are very well vetted. They know what they're doing. Obviously, yes, you still recruit from other areas just based on personality, but how are you finding just the talent pool here as far as the understanding for people who are applying either from the traditional market or people who are coming in from other markets?
Well, that's a challenging question for me because we don't actually have any operating assets yet, so I'm not looking to hire. But what I will say is that there are a lot of incredibly talented and smart people here, and I'm encouraged that the likes of, I think it's IRPM, perhaps the UKAA will start at some point some more distinctive training and structure programs around what it takes to actually operate build to rent. I know the NAA in the States. It's another quite a big difference from the States versus here. The professional bodies that are operating in the States have massive training programs and certifications that really help bring people up in the sector. Oftentimes they work with universities on intern and grad programs. I know Virginia Tech has one of those that's quite popular. So I'm encouraged that we will evolve that. But I've certainly in the States hired from hotels. I've gotten fantastic service at a restaurant and given them my card and hired them on the spot. It's really all about people. People buy from people. And so you want to hire people who care about people. At the end of the day, you're hiring for a culture and you're training on a skill. And I think that's a key distinction of any sort of service business, but particularly ours. Home is like the most personal thing to a person. It's the biggest check somebody writes every month, and you've got to treat it with that level of customer care that matches. So.
Well, and I imagine that even flows up to your corporate teams too, as far as finding people in this market who are actually adapting into that. So,
I just would like to say that absolutely I agree with you, and I think that you can train on property, you can train on the technical, but you can't make people customer friendly,
right.
and that is the much more important attribute when you're recruiting. And also our recruitment over the last 3 years, when we started recruiting, particularly for on-site teams, there wasn't a market out there, it was hard to find the right people. Over that 3 years, I'm really pleased to say that we now have a much more positive feedback, and people want to get into the build-to-rent sector. They know about it, they're bright people, they're capable, and the market is opening up, definitely. Yeah.
and actually, Helen, I was going to ask you too. I mean, obviously your different sites have different needs, and you have some where you have a much shorter time to get teams up and trained. How have you changed your training patterns to make sure that they're living up to the LIVE expectations?
Okay, I mean, I think, again, this has been a very steep learning curve for us, and one that we probably didn't get right in the beginning. But what we do now is we embrace the team by bringing them into the office, by housing them in our own environment for a period of time, getting them to understand the culture of LIVE, what we're trying to deliver, the fact that the resident is definitely at the centre of everything that we do. They also get to work with colleagues in the office, so they understand the issues that they may have. So when they're back out on site, they have an empathy, that they understand that you need a right to rent. You can't just let somebody move in. And so it's working. They work very closely on that side. We also get our teams who are in the office to go out to site and work out there and understand what it's like to be on the firing line, and what you need, what equipment you need to mentally to be able to deal with that. So I think that that's absolutely sort of what we've tried to do. And in terms of that training, we're developing our training program, we're formalising it more. There's obviously all the typical health and safety things that you need, but what we're trying to do is to create a career progression path for our teams, so that they can start with us at an entry level and they can see a future with us and stay with us.
And I completely agree with you, Helen, especially if you have, it's very easy if you have the operation just in one location. So if you only have London, then it's much easier. But if you have, Manchester, Birmingham, Leicester, Leeds, Southampton, it's very important for them to feel that they're part of a bigger group. So they're part of the family, and their culture will blend. So we have the same thing. So we have a day in a week that we sit and we have a weekly calls, and we have everybody's attending that call and just say, so how was your week? What did you do? What did we learn? And also trying to use the people who've been in the business for a bit longer to help other teams to go through the mobilisation plan, so they feel that they've got another project to work on, rather than I'm stuck in this building, I only have to look after 138 units.
Absolutely. So I'm conscious of time. We've got about 5 more minutes. Do we have any questions from? Yeah, over here.
It's for Jenny, if you don't mind. With such a high concentration in one particular area, how do you, if you do, adapt to the rental values and market conditions? And conscious that you've got stabilised buildings at a set price point, how are you going to, should the market next year dip slightly? How are you going to launch on new buildings, and what's your strategy behind that?
Many strategies, I think, is probably the easiest way to say it. Ultimately, we're creating a new market, as you mentioned about North Acton, and we do have obviously the benefit of owning the estate at Wembley Park, and therefore being able to influence the placemaking and feed directly into that. So there's lots of work happening around Wembley Park as a place, and then ultimately it's very much a marketing game in terms of changing perceptions of an area and changing perceptions of what renting is. So because we're growing, and when we opened our first building, we were a localised market, and we were starting to attract people from different locations, but ultimately we're having to accelerate that in order to fulfill the demand of, what's coming in terms of volume of apartments, hence why we're on the tubes, et cetera. So there's that aspect, which is, so it's very much a marketing game. But then we're very much, we're such an open business in the sense of we're really keen to experiment. And we're actually in a really, really exciting time in residential lettings, I would say, because there's tech companies, there's sharer companies, there's all sorts of different people trying to solve problems for customers in the market. And that's what we as TP, and I think all of us here, are aligned with. How do we solve problems? The sharers market is a big problem because legislation holds you back with the joint and severally liable, and it's messy. It's messy to operate. There are people trying to solve that problem. So there's other ways that we can look at renting our apartments, and that's ultimately what we're doing, whether it's through corporates or whether it's new businesses, whether it's through tech, or it's how we reach our customers. I don't know about anyone else here, but for us, Rightmove and Zoopla, it sort of stopped working some time ago. So, there've got to be other ways to reach customers. And that's what we're focusing on, not standing still. And I think probably we're all on that same page. So it's a really exciting time.
And I think, in the previous session, it was a talk about, like, when you have the first residents in, it's like if they have a good experience, that will be your, like, a walking brand and, your marketing tool, because they will have a conversation with their friends when they're going out, or if they just at work, they say, oh, I'm staying here, it's lovely, I've got a good residence, there is a safe, secure, there is a concierge. And these are the things that they will say. So if you can make your customers, the existing customers, happy, I'm sure they will, it will go a long way.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, sorry.
Your residents are always your best ambassadors
exactly.
by far, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you want to analyse where they've come from as well, because most people connect through the internet. So you've got all these Google analytics. Study those. What people are coming through the door, where are they coming from, what's enticing them. That all that information is there at your fingertips. Just go and mine it, and then that's going to solve a huge problem for where you're going to go to next.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll go actually back to the back of the room because you guys were waiting patiently. Oh, this gentleman here in the tie. Oh, you can pick one. Pick a hand. That's fine.
Thank you. It sort of extends on the question of if you've got a stabilised asset or not, how much the residents and their participation play back humanly through your building. How do you support that, and how do you support it digitally?
Who wants to field that one first?
Nobody wants to go first.
But it's massively important. I think that getting that engagement is crucial. We talk about what we do, and again in the morning session we were talking about we don't actually manage property. We're looking after people, and we're homemaking for them. So I think that is really crucial. We try and do it by getting the team on site engaged. We have at Live we have our app, and we use that with residents so they can suggest ideas. We can also segment that. So if you're not a runner and you don't want to hear about running every week, then you cut that out, and we don't tell you that there's running sessions. If you like wine and you want to go and taste wine every week, then you can select that. So I think you've got to listen to the people in the building. You've also got to work out each building is different. We have buildings where people, they don't want a lot of things in the building. They want to do boot camp, they want to go running, they want that to be sort of promoted. Other people, it's Saturday morning brunch sessions. So you listen to what they want, and you're there to facilitate, you're not there to dictate.
And I think from me, the key thing is that to know your customer and value them as an individual. So you need to know who's living behind this door. And if you get to know them, you will be able to give a lot back. And our job with creating all these amenity spaces is not to force people to use them, to give them a choice and design it in a way that they naturally bumped into each other on the way, in or out. So I think it's important to see them as individuals rather than this is a block and I have this number of people living with me. And I do it myself. I don't know if any of other colleagues, I knock people's door and I have a chat with them, and I know about their problems, I know their name, and it's it's really nice. So I encourage everybody to do that, because I think it will really help your operation. And then when they want to renew, they're just thinking twice, oh, why should I go out and look for something else? I already know my landlord, they know me. For the sake of 2.5% or a 3% or a 5%, do I really want to move out? Probably not, if I'm happy, because the removal van will cost you more, and then getting your deposit and re-registering your deposit. So I think these are small things, and I completely agree with Helen. If they don't want to be, you have to ask them, how would you like us to communicate with you? Because we're just assuming that everybody likes to be, in touch. You need to be in touch with them through email, or just, some people might like WhatsApp. I know a few that they like it, so I think we just have to adapt.
Yeah. Agreed. And realistically, when they're happy living there and they're renewing, they're going to refer friends over as well.
Exactly.
And that's the best resource you can ever have. Absolutely.
And you're always looking, and the data is telling you that people are moving within 5 miles. If they're not, so why? Why do they move within 5 miles?
Right, and typically if it's outside, it's because of work or a massive life change. Yeah. You're right, absolutely. I'll let you pick somebody since,
Afternoon, Tim Reed for Communications. A lot of talk in Build to Rent around millennials and younger generations. My question is, do you guys see a market in senior living in terms of Build to Rent, and how are you mobilising your businesses to look at that area, or not?
Good question.
I can go first this time. I just think that we should just get away from this 25 to 35 years old. I think it's wrong. And I know that we will all have students living with us, but I know that I have people who are 60, 50, 70 years old. So the market is changing. So we need to adapt and respond to that. Otherwise, we're all having these cool gadgets in our building when we have a 60 years old, walking in, because they have the same needs. So they don't want to be isolated. They like to live somewhere safe and secure. And sometimes when I talk to other customers, they say, oh, I want to sell my house and I would like to have a luxury of having a concierge or a cleaner. And they are living in a flat, but if you design your amenity or a community space well, it's just an extension to their living room, and they would like to talk to someone else as well. So I think we need to be very careful. I've personally seen people 55, 60, 70. I had a retired couple 3 weeks ago, which I just said, so why us and what are you doing here? I said, well, I sold my house. I like somewhere safe and secure. Mm-hmm. So
I'd second that, but I think the thing is the lettings market, if you like, has always been broad, and the term young professional really winds me up, because I've seen all walks of life, been in the industry for nearly 20 years, or how upsetting. I think what I've seen ultimately change is what people expect from service levels, and not even a concierge service, I just mean in terms of service levels and product standard. That's what I've really seen change. And the market is shifting, it is changing, but the lettings market's always been broad.
And if I can actually switch from moderator to panelist briefly for that question, coming from a market where realistically you have so many different types of tenures within multifamily, build to rent, whatever name it is that we want to give, which very often the customer doesn't even ever hear, it's just about them having the awareness. There is a level of freedom that it provides to seniors. People tend to think senior living, and there's instantly the stigma of, oh, I have to worry about healthcare, I have to worry about food services, all of this. It's not necessarily that. It's just very simply they want a quality place to live where somebody's going to make sure that they're taken care of in a great house with good service. If the sink is leaking, that somebody's going to come over and fix it. On our site down in Southampton, we actually have a couple who moved from Devon. They bought a house over there because they were retiring. They thought, oh, idyllic life. It was too idyllic. They wanted to move back into a city center. They've since sold their car. They've now renewed. They're happy there. And we actually have additional couples who've now moved into that are at different ages. But like you said, there's this image of, oh, it's all the millennials, it's all the young professionals. It's really not. Yes, you're going to get that in any property, but it's about the diversity. And what you find often is that different age ranges actually really appreciate the different, having so many different types of residents within one building.
Yeah.
Even at Bow Square, for instance, we have, families that have met up with one another, and then they have, maybe they have kids, and then there are seniors in the community who instantly start talking to them and they become friends. So there are so many different ways that it can work.
And I also like to say, like, when you're 50, 60, 70, you're probably not working that hard and you would like to travel. How many of us are, struggling when we want to go, around the world or go to, to a week in Europe, and then we have to knock over a neighbor's door and say, do you mind if you look after my plant? Do you mind if you, collect my parcel? Like, if you have that availability and you create that facility, people would love to come and use it.
Okay, I think we've got 15 minutes till the next session starts, but I think I'll do this gentleman a disservice, and I didn't let him have the...
See, the problem is I'm so short, all I can see are hands, so I'm like,
That's why you should stand here, so you can have a lecture.
The problem is nobody will be able to see me behind the podium, that's why,
If the answer's sharp, that'd be great.
Okay.
So on the marketing side, I've seen competition between different providers, and it's pushing the other providers. For example, deposit replacement schemes, allowing pets in properties. That's a massive change in the rental market. How have the likes of TP found the effects of offering this? Has there been good uptake? Have you experienced the tenant going through the journey and coming out the other end? And how's that affected things? Because it's quite complex and new.
Yeah, short answer is, yeah, it's been brilliant and great take-up, both on the pet side and on the zero deposit side. And we're thrilled to be one of the first to be doing that kind of thing. As Stephanie said, we will absolutely all be trying to outdo each other if we're not already trying to do that. But it's great for the customer. Ultimately, it's great for the customer, and that's
right.
what we're all about. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Great, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. But I think it's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much. I think it's gone for a lot longer. It could go a lot deeper, a lot wider, and everything like that. So, but I think everybody here, if we could all put our hands together for the panel, for Stephanie and a panel.
thank you guys.